Hello and welcome to this roundup, which is going to focus on the England cricket team. They've done a brilliant job in the last 12 months of creating these biospheres, which means they can continue to play international cricket in these horrendous COVID-riddled times. They played a full summer last year. They did incredibly well. They played the likes of Pakistan, the West Indies. They played ODIs against Australia. And they've headed into 2021 with a ridiculously packed schedule, all things considered. If they get all those matches in, it will be incredible. An incredible achievement by management, but also by the players, because these biospheres are not easy. We've been ridiculing the tennis players for moaning about 14 days in a hotel room, but we are all bored of lockdown now. I think everyone I know is starting to struggle. Yes, if they stay in their biospheres, they get to earn a living, they get to play cricket for a living, they get to become famous, they get to enhance their careers while the rest of us are stuck on pause. But they are away from their families, they are away from their friends, they are stuck in their hotel rooms, they can't go out to dinner as a group. There's a lot they are giving up, as are the rest of us. I'm not saying they've got it easier or harder than the rest of us. There just is more to it than just well-paid sports stars having a moan. So, back to England. England are in Sri Lanka. It was a series that was supposed to be played in March last year, was obviously canned at the last minute. They did actually fly there. They pretty much flew straight back. It's a two-test series. Should two-test series be a thing? Not in my opinion. Yes, when you've got a massive inequality in abilities in the two teams, no one needs to see 3 or 4 tests of one team getting destroyed in 3 days. But how are the lower teams ever going to improve if they don't get as much exposure to the top teams and exposure to Test cricket? Because the problem is Test cricket, we've been talking about Test cricket dying for however many decades now, and then every year we get an unbelievable test between someone and we go, see, it's not dead at all. Unfortunately, it's still not putting bums on seats in the majority of countries around the world, and it's not profitable. Those are issues for the powers that be in the sport, not little old me, but the fact remains there is an issue where the lower ranked countries are not playing enough Test cricket because it's not profitable. They're not getting the exposure at Test cricket, they're not getting the experience, they're not bringing the players through who can play Test cricket and long innings, and then when they do play a top team, they get destroyed. Sri Lanka are a rebuilding team. They obviously did incredibly well back in the 90s when they burst onto the international scene in ODIs. They then built a pretty decent Test team, Jayawardene, Jayasuriya, Sangakkara, etc, etc. All greats, all good cricket thinkers, good cricket brains, all long since retired. The team at the moment is not great, let's be honest. There are a lot of reasons for that. The country's had a civil war, it's been subject to terrorism attacks, they had the awful tsunamis that wiped out the pitches, and God knows how many people, how many coaches, how many potential players. So they're up against it. They've not played much Test cricket at home, so even though they should obviously be better in their conditions than England are, they just simply haven't had the opportunity to play in those conditions. They did go and play a warm-up series in South Africa of a couple of tests, which they did lose, but they did play quite well. They weren't completely destroyed. Then they had that first day against England in the first test, which was abysmal. Michael Vaughan called it out pretty harshly, so did a lot of other players. It wasn't worthy of Test cricket, it wasn't even as good as a county would produce, etc, etc. The issue with it was England weren't bowling massively well. If England had bowled incredibly well and you could say that no batsman in the world would have survived, that is a different story. But when England were bowling mediocre balls and the Sri Lankans were getting themselves out, that's an issue. The good news is the test went to the full 5 days. Yes, that was helped by weather, and yes, day 5 was only half an hour long, but for a long time it looked like it could be over in 2.5 days. So we will take that. It's quite a quick tour, it's quite a quick turnaround. They start again this week. Same pitch in Gaul, same conditions, same bio bubbles, still no fans, etc. It will be a different pitch within the cricket ground. Interesting to see what they prepare. First one spun a little bit, not loads, didn't seem brilliantly either, was not a green top, as you'd expect. Here comes the issue. England have got a very congested calendar. They need a big squad to survive the whole year. That is fine. They have a lot of strength in depth in certain areas. They are rotating their fast bowlers. They are determined to get Jimmy and Broad to extend their careers as long as physically possible, which is great. Broad obviously is in great form. He is also quite a lot younger than Anderson and doesn't always like the comparison that both their careers are on the same trajectory when he should have more years left in him. The worst thing for England would be to lose Jimmy and Broad at the same time, absolutely. So the fact those two can get used to playing without each other is a really good thing. Broad getting used to actually leading the attack, because for the whole of his career he's effectively been in Jimmy's shadow, is another great thing. The issue is they are going to India, and India is one of the most unforgiving places to play Test cricket. The Indians have obviously just won very historically in Australia. They are ravaged by injury, but that means they've now developed a strength in depth that they probably didn't even know they had. They do prepare turning wickets, obviously. There were some very interesting debates during the Sri Lanka test between Atherton and Hussain as to whether or not the Indians actually play spin that well. They had this aura because they always had spinning wickets because it's the subcontinent and because they had so many great players of spin. But now with the IPL being such a force it is, with strike rates being higher, with so many players coming through the IPL before they hit the international scene, there's actually quite an interesting debate as to whether or not they actually play spin as well as they used to. It will help England a lot if that is true. At the moment, spinners-wise, they've got Bess and Leach, both played in the first test, and you'd imagine will both play in the second test in Sri Lanka because they both need time on the pitch. Leach especially has barely played in the last couple of years. He's been ravaged by injury and obviously COVID and bio-bubbles and all sorts of things. And obviously we do not play two spinners in England. So he desperately needs time in the middle. He needs to bowl a lot of balls. He got into a rhythm. He looks decent, as does Bess. We're not quite at a Swan level yet. Swan was very, very good and actually sort of world class at what he could do. So that is a major, major concern for England, as is generally their schedule. They are going to India. They have Pakistan in the summer in England. They potentially have New Zealand coming over, although that one is still to be TBC. Massively depends on what's going on COVID-wise here and New Zealand. With obviously New Zealand going for the elimination strategy, the last thing they want is to send a bunch of people to England where we have COVID all over the place. And then we have the Ashes next winter. Based on what India have just done to Australia, that should give England some hope for the Ashes. Australia is still a class outfit. In Labuschagne and Smith, they have two of the best batsmen in the world currently playing. Smith, of course, we can't get out for various reasons. Hopefully our bowlers are watching the tapes because India did manage to get him out quite cheaply a number of times. More to the point, Australia's fast bowling unit is insanely good. And if you look at our top order batsmen, we have Root, world-class player, captain, finally back in form. Great, tick, tick, tick. We have Bairstow, who, if he makes a run in the Test team again, is a world-class player. We have Stokes, great. We have Pope, who very much looks like the Ian Bell mould and certainly looks like he could have a long run in the Test team. We've got Broad and Anderson. We've got Butler. We have the spine of an exceptionally good team. What we are missing is proven players over numbers of years. Sibley, Crawley, Rory Burns, they have all played well in isolation. They have all been able to withstand attacks. They have all got nuggety hundreds. They have all occupied the crease. But none of them have had long enough to really prove themselves on the international stage. Who on earth are England going to pick? At the moment, we have Crawley and Sibley opening the batting because Burns is on paternity leave. But we also have Dan Lawrence, who's come into the fold in Sri Lanka and looked absolutely at home. Unorthodox player, but so far scored 73 in the first innings, was unbeaten in the second. The second innings was very entertaining because we were chasing a very small total. 3 very quick wickets went down, including an abysmal run out of Root by Bairstow. And then Dan Lawrence came to the crease and Bairstow nearly ran himself out the very next ball and honestly looked like a headless chicken. And Dan Lawrence just didn't care. He played his shots, he left, he just did everything he was meant to do. So, yeah, he looks a class player. We need to choose some of them and give them a long run in the team. If they don't work, they don't work. But the problem is, over the last 10 or so years, once Strauss went, Cook went through a gazillion opening partners. We just couldn't decide on our batting lineup. Certain players were moved up and down the order, which wasn't fair to them. We had players like Bairstow, who made an absolute name for himself, seemed like he'd be in the Test team for the next 10 years, and then went so horribly out of form that he ended up being dropped. We need the same players, in my opinion, for a long time. So unfortunately for the likes of Pope and Burns, Pope's out because he dislocated his shoulder. He's still recovering from surgery. Burns, as I said, is on paternity. Stokes is being rested. Stokes will, of course, come straight back in. They have one more test in Sri Lanka, the players who are currently playing. They really, really, really need to make a name for themselves. They need 100 or else they will be vulnerable to being dropped for one of those returning players. The returning players, it may well be tough luck, but if everyone makes 100 and everyone looks really good, that is your place gone. And that is the risk you always take. Whenever you get injured, you may never get back in. So there's lots of interesting things to watch out for in this second test with Sri Lanka. Sibley and Crawley both failed in both of the innings in the first test. They both need a score. Root looks in good form, so that's good. Bairstow looked all right in the first innings, not so great in the second. He could do with some time in the middle to increase his confidence and so on. And Dan Lawrence obviously can massively take his chance here. So although on paper England will win comfortably, it may well be one-sided again. There is still a lot to watch out for in this test, and what happens in this test and in Sri Lanka is going to set up the selection for India and what's going to happen in the rest of the year, which is a very, very busy year. So yeah, watch out for the spinners because we are probably only going to play one of them in the summer. And who's going to get the call? Is it Bess or Leach? Or perhaps one of the others? And who on earth is going to make up a batting lineup? So plenty to watch for when the second test gets underway later this week.